So I have a question about so David Hume says that, and correct me if I'm wrong on how I say this, that witness testimony alone isn't can never be enough evidence to establish a miracle. And is that correct so far? Right?
That is
Oh, that
correct.
is what you were.
So
Yeah,
far.
that is what you were talking
So
about
far,
a
so
minute ago.
good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
and
far, so good.
and what I hear Christian apologists say to that is, oh, he's just making a claim. That's just a claim. You're using a claim to refute a claim, so it's self-defeating. How do you guys deal with that or package that or whatever?
Well, because if that's where you end it, then I guess then you haven't included David Hume's justification for that. So David Hume's justification for that is because it's always going to be likely, again, when we're talking purely about testimony, that it's always going to be more likely that the person is lying. And so you can establish what's the likelihood that a person X is lying, and maybe it's 5% of the time, maybe it's 90% of the time, who knows? But but a miracle is theoretically going to be lower percentage than the fact that they may be lying, and then you have to also add on that they might be mistaken, right? So they may be, so that maybe I thought I saw a Bigfoot in the woods, but I really just saw someone in a furry jacket. But I went home, I didn't ever get closure on the furry jacket guy, so I went home thinking I saw Bigfoot, right? So if you add up the likelihood that someone's lying or mistaken, and granted that that's going to vary based on the claim or based on the person, that's still for David Hume and for someone like me who's a methodological naturalist, that's always going to be a higher percentage than the miracle claim. And so I guess in a way they might say you're question begging because you're saying you're defining a miracle in a certain way that it doesn't happen very often or whatever. And that's where you need to actually then you might wrestle with that theist about, and I'm not sure, Kevin, if you're a theist or not, it doesn't really matter. You seem to be asking how I would respond.
Yeah.
So anyway, the point is, then you need to say, well, like most theists want to say that a miracle, like I deal most often with the resurrection of Jesus, right? A thing that if it happened to only one person. So on a statistical basis, let's grant for the sake of the argument that Jesus absolutely raised from the dead. I don't know how many people have been alive. Let's say 20 billion people have been alive in the world. I don't know what the number is. So one out of 20 billion. Oh, 1 out of 100 billion people have raised from the dead. So when you're talking to me and someone's walking to me and say, based on testimony alone, nothing else, Jesus rose from the dead, I am epistemologically very sound, even though it may have happened. It's very rational for me to say, well, there's more than a 1 in 100 billion chance they're lying, and there's more than a 1 in 100 billion chance that they've made a mistake, right? That's what Hume is talking about. He's just saying you have to look at those just purely on a statistical basis. Now, if you want to be the kind of person that says, well, miracles happen every day and every birth is a miracle, and well, then we're not talking about miracle claims in the same sense and in the same way, and that's where you have to kind of get into it. And I'm not pitching this advocating for myself necessarily, but I'm sort of telling you what David Hume's intent was when he was trying to put forth that philosophy. And it's not just a claim that these things are more likely than miracles. He was defining miracle in a very specific way. And so in that very specific way, he was defining a miracle as a deity actively intervening in nature, right? And so just statistically, that's supposed to be the exception rather than the rule. Like if you just say, well, photosynthesis is a miracle, well, whatever, we're just lost. So that's, I guess, how. So you got to get on the same page with the person about what a miracle is.
Yep, I get that. There's that. Do you just kind of look at it then like a word semantics game that apologists will use when they say, "Oh, that's just a
absolutely,
claim."
Yeah." They're just saying, "Well, you're just making a claim, so I'm making a claim." Yeah, that's and obviously there's trouble with the word claim, because does claim mean merely the utterance of the phrase, or is that utterance combined with testimony? There's all kinds of weird semantics to get into here. So I prefer not to get into semantic arguments. I just was for some reason ranting about Hume, I guess because you asked about Hume. So.
Yeah, well, that's just because that's one of the frustrating things about this. I find when I'm talking to both sides about this, and it's really hard to kind of discern. Okay, I don't want to talk to people that have an agenda. I want to talk to people that want to try to get to reality or truth.
Yeah.
And I think what sucks about this is like someone like me who's like kind of floating in that middle. I talk to atheists, and I think people like you guys are like genuinely trying to get to truth. I don't think this is a game I don't look at this as a game you're playing, but like even if someone were to look at it like that, I think everyone of every religion and atheism would technically be doing that, but I don't look at that as like necessarily a bad thing, I guess. But it's just unfortunate because I think there's people like that on both sides and you're just going to have people that are going to be mistaken. And I don't know, it would be cool to just like have a world, I'm just kind of ranting now, where it's like, where we could just know for certainty that there's a God, or know for certainty that there isn't a God, and not this middle ground that it seems like we have,
It would be cool if we lived in a world where we could know for certain anything, but we're not in such a world. The best that we have is evidence. And so like, that's kind of what we bring to the table, is we're looking for evidence to believe a thing. And there's, as we talked about with the last caller or not the last caller, but one of the last callers, is that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So if Paul calls me up and tells me that he had pizza last night, that's not an extraordinary claim. It is a thing that, like, if I really cared, I could find evidence for, but it would be pretty ordinary evidence: a receipt, a box, a phone record of the call, it's something to stool sample, whatever it may be, to show me that this is something that happened. But if Paul calls me up and says that there's aliens, or that God exists, or that there's gophers in the moon, or whatever other crazy big thing, you need more than just a little bit of evidence for that. And so, you're talking about that the idea that Hume making the claim that testimony is insufficient is in itself just a claim. Well, what's the alternative? The alternative is, I believe anything that anybody says to me. Anybody can come along and sell me a bridge, and I'm going to say, well, I mean, they said it. Fuck, dude. I mean, what else can I do but believe it? And like that, that doesn't seem like a very safe way to live. And so, like, Hume, of course, he's making a claim. He's making a claim about the best way to go about being a logical thinking person. And I think it's a reasonable claim to make. And so you now get to decide, philosophy isn't science. Philosophy is just a suggestion of how to think about the world. All the philosophy bros will hate me for saying that. But like, you now get to decide, do you agree with Hume or not? Even as a religious person, do you think that anybody who comes up to you and says whatever claim they have about whatever religion, because as I'm sure you've heard us say, you can sit here and talk to me about whatever your religion is all day long, and I guarantee there's somebody else with another religion who can say the same exact shit for a different God that's incompatible with yours. So do you believe them too because they said the same shit? Or do you say, all right, I'm not going to take you at face value. Ordinary claims are ordinary evidence. Extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. And here's religion, which offers not even ordinary evidence for its extraordinary claims. Are you going to believe it? That's the gambit thrown down by this way of thinking. I'm not an expert on Hume by any means.
No, that's a good way to put it. No, that's a good way to put it, though. You're saying, what's the alternative? And what a Christian apologist would say, well, the alternative would be just conveniently what I set the axioms to warrant belief in the proposition, right? And they
only
can
my
those
belief.
Axioms.
And it's,
not
just my belief. It's not just my religion. It's my version. It's my interpretation of this version of this particular holy book that I use at my church, and only the parts that I've read. That's what's important. You know what I mean?
I had a Christian friend of mine earlier tell me I was oppressed by demons because I'm asking these questions. So I know the feeling of that.
And that is what we call in the business a thought stopper. If you can say that, then you no longer have to put in the hard work of actually thinking about what you're thinking about. And so, like, that's what happens. It's cult thinking. It's cult behavior. Anyway, I think we're about. We've got only. I was going to say we've only got about 50 minutes left, and I want to take one more caller. But like, Paul, do you have anything else to add?
No, blanket advice. Any time you're having a conversation in almost any topic, the first establishing that you're talking about the same thing is probably the most important thing you can do, even though it kind of sucks and is boring and sounds definitional. I don't care what the topic is. If the two people are using the same word to mean different things, you're not going to get anywhere. So first figure out what a miracle is, and then figure out from there.
Right. That's why it always sounds like we're being dicks whenever people call in and we're like, what God do you mean? And shit like that. And they're like, well, you know what I'm talking about.
I get it. I totally understand. You guys have a good one. Take care. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate you. Take care.